You got McMillan and McDonald here with you on Birds 365, and we have the well-dressed Ian Cummings here with us on Birds 365 from ProFootballNetwork.com, their draft analyst. Here's why I want to start with you today, Ian. When I saw it, not one, not two, but three different stories talking about J.J. McCarthy potentially going with the number 2 pick in the draft this week, I immediately said, hold on, let me reach for my bullshit flag. I'm ready to throw it right here, right now. I believe the lying season has begun. We're still a month away from the NFL draft, but the misinformation season has already kicked into gear, J.J. McCarthy being the number 2 pick in the draft. Am I off base? Am I just woefully wrong and he really could go number 2 as per your opinion? Or do I have this nailed? People are already starting to put stories out there. Give it to information guys. Get it out there into the general public that, wow, he could go number 2. And they have ulterior motives for potentially doing something like that other than selecting a player like that high.
Well, it's misinformation season, and that always happens this time of year. We saw it with C.J. Stroud last year in the S2 score, all of that entire fiasco. So I think it's a delicate balance because you need to understand that you are in misinformation season, right? So you got to be cognizant of that. But at the same time, whenever I hear something like that, I try and acknowledge why it might be possible, right? Play devil's advocate in your head too. When you look at J.J. McCarthy and what he did at Michigan, he's a winner. We know NFL teams like that, right? I don't use QB wins as a statistic that would sway me personally. But hey, when they have success, that is something to take note of. And you look at a lot of the soft skills that a QB does well. Mechanically, he's very clean. He's got a good arm. He's got very good athleticism. And then all the reports of his mentality, his character are glowing, right? So I look at his age as well. Only 21 years old compared to Jayden Daniels, who's going to be 24 in December, I believe. So teams might look at that 2-year developmental runway and look at McCarthy and say, hey, maybe in 2 years, he could be at the level that some of these other guys are at, right? So you play devil's advocate and you look at why it might be possible. He's young. He's talented. He can operate an offense in structure. He can give it to the running game when you need him to. He's accurate. He's got great mechanics. So I think, to me, it's a little too rich. It's a little too rich, but I can understand why some teams might feel that way. But to your point, yes, we're in the thick of misinformation season, so you got to take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to get somebody like Minnesota or somebody like the New York Giants to pop up and go give them something astronomical to go get a player they might want. It's interesting, quarterbacks. Jody and I were talking about it. I saw your composite rankings going back to 2021. I love those because I always like to see where guys rate compared to others, guys who hit or missed. So I think that's a good exercise. And particularly at the quarterback position, like if I was an owner and nobody's dropping $8 billion on me, Ian, in the next 24 hours, but if my scouting staff said to me, oh, I like all 4 quarterbacks, I'd be like, get out. That not everyone's going to be a fit for your organization. And that's what Jody and I were discussing before you came on. Development, fit, scheme, coaching, all matters. How much do you weigh that when you start looking at your, obviously not the evaluation of the prospect, but where they're going to fit in the draft and how that's going to affect them?
It's something, again, you want to be cognizant of for sure. Now, I'm a media scout, right? It's my job to write articles that people can, consume and that they can learn something about these prospects, right? So I understand that my perspective is limited. I'm not in the interview room with these teams getting the insight on their character on the ground level, right? So there's some things about these guys that I would love to know that at a certain level I can't. And you got to accept that with your perspective and the limitations of that. For me, scheme fit is more towards, like you said, kind of projecting the best fits for them, right? Like Jayden Daniels, we've seen him in the Commanders conversation a lot. And I think one reason for that is Cliff Kingsbury comes from an offensive system that integrates a lot of spread looks, right? And you look at Jayden Daniels at LSU, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., a lot of 4 wide receiver sets that are spreading the field and allowing him to work vertically with that accuracy down the field, but also the spread looks spread out the defense and allow him to use his athleticism as a running threat too. So you kind of take their traits and you infuse them and kind of channel them into those certain schematic fits. For example, the Patriots, Alex Van Pelt, that offense, you saw what Joe Flacco did down the stretch for Cleveland last year. Drake May is a big-armed guy who has that drive velocity to capitalize on those stacked looks down the field too, seam balls. that could be a fit as well. So for me, it's something that I don't confine anyone to a certain range, but you take their traits and you apply them to certain scheme fits, and you kind of delineate what might be better for them.
And one of the guys who's been out there trumpeting for J.J. McCarthy, of course, is his former coach, Jim Harbaugh. I think I saw a quote where he said, greatest quarterback to ever come out of Michigan. As that Brady guy turned out okay. I don't know if Jim missed that, but if he really feels that way, why aren't we talking about a Justin Herbert trade? He's at number 5. I'd have take a pretty good bet here that J.J. McCarthy's sitting there when he's on the board. If he loves him that much, why not take him there, coach? He's completely in charge of that. You talk about turning over the organization. Our boy's got the keys, the kitchen sink. He's got everything he needs in L.A. Why'd he go get his quarterback if McCarthy's that good?
Yeah, that's the tough part of it. And also, he had a chance to join the Falcons as a head coach, right? Would have had an opportunity to trade up from number 8 if he wanted to for McCarthy. So there were other avenues for him. For Harbaugh, I think it's just, choosing the right path for him. And obviously Justin Herbert is a top 12 quarterback in the league when he's on his game and when he's properly supported. So I think walking into that, it's tough to pass up too. But at the same time, when you're with a guy like McCarthy for 3 years, you see a lot of him behind the scenes. So I respect it. He's kind of pumping him up and kind of sharing what he's seen, which is worthwhile, especially to these NFL teams who are going to invest in that behind the scenes as well.
All right, let's get to your composite ranking. So we're going back to 2021, and I think we all thought at the time Trevor Lawrence was about the cleanest prospect, at least since maybe Andrew Luck at the quarterback position. And he's been good, but I don't think he's been great. He was number 1 on your composite list. I think most people would still agree with you because there's still, I think, the upside, and you see, and we'll see if he can continue to go in a positive direction. 2 and 3 over that time, ahead of guys like C.J. Stroud and Justin Fields, Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, are Drake May and Caleb Williams. That's pretty good. What stands out about those 2 particular prospects that they're so well valued, even compared to prior years?
Yeah, and one reason I wanted to share this composite list is because, every time you release a list, you have number 1, number 2. Drake May has been my QB1 by a really slight margin the entire process, but I wanted to share this list to kind of contextualize how close they are. They are neck and neck. Like, it is basically a tie for them, and they're both guys that I'm extremely high on. With Drake May, I think it's the combination of physical talent and operational utility. That was one thing that really sold me on CJ Stroud last year. Stroud was a guy who I thought had more athleticism than he let on with his play style, right? He had that creative capacity and really easy arm talent, but then very accurate, really good processor, anticipator. I think Drake May has a little bit more room to improve his mechanics. I think there is some slight volatility there, and that shows with, some situational imprecision. But in his tape, I see really high-level leverage IQ, both as a pocket navigator and a processor down the field. Really good at identifying optimal defensive looks and capitalizing with his arm talent and his drive velocity. He's a really good athlete for his size, too. He's a legit runner when he has a runway in space, but he wins within structure. That's the thing that gives him the slot of Caleb Williams for me. If I had to pinpoint one thing, I think May is a little bit more natural at taking what's given in structure and utilizing his talents to elevate the offense within the confines, right? He's a really good pocket navigator. He can use his arm elasticity to widen angles as well. The arm strength is incredible. The eye manipulation is very good too. So, and he can adjust protections, already for such a young QB. A lot of the things that you need to do as a QB to kind of command the offense, he can do. So the physical talent, operational utility for me makes May special. For Caleb Williams, it's that special creation ability, right? That's kind of the most advertised thing. And to me, that's the top selling point for sure. The change of direction, the agility, the off-platform throwing ability, the ability to create something out of nothing time and time again. And we saw it on that USC team, right? That defense gave up 50 points a week, right? And a lot of the offensive look too didn't always have outlets in the short range to give him an easy solution if he was pressured. So a lot of times the pressure was on Caleb to make something out of nothing, right? So obviously, when you're in those situations, there is going to be some volatility. And I do think he can still improve. There are times where there is a route open and he misses it, right? So I think those initial reads, if he can be a little more consistent with those, but he's a very smooth RPO operator. He's got really clean mechanics in the short range and the rhythm game. And then just his arm talent, his creation ability is off the charts. So both guys, in my opinion, are franchise guys worth the top overall pick. And honestly, I don't think there's a wrong choice if you're the Bears.
I'm going to be borrowing / stealing arm elasticity.
That's one of my favorites for sure.
Drake May going forward. I love that. We want to flop over to the Eagles. John and I have a general disagreement, and there's just a difference of opinion more than anything else. I think the Eagles should have a need for and will draft a cornerback in the first round. John's been leaning toward an offensive lineman more than anything else. I couldn't justify that in my own mind. You got to balance your grade, your draft board. Do you move a guy just because of positional? You know, I'm not saying that, but I think there'll be a group of players at those two positions, both offensive tackle and cornerback, that will be very closely rated to one another. And I think the Eagles will take a cornerback. How many quarterbacks, assuming they stay at 22, which we know Howie almost never does. He usually moves up or moves down. But for the purpose of today's conversation, we got to lock them in somewhere at 22. That's where their pick is. How good a cornerback is going to be on the board there? How good an offensive lineman is going to be on the board there? I know it'd be really nice to know who the 21 guys who are already off the board, but we're going to ask someone who understands the draft as well as you to speculate. At 22, cornerback, offensive line, how good are the Eagles' choices going to be?
I think you have a little bit less volume at the corner position. I can see my top two are Terrion Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell. I don't see either one being available at that pick. I think your top option is going to be Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama, which he's still a top 20 prospect for me. I know he's fallen under the radar a little bit, but I love his man coverage game. He's so disciplined and smooth technically, really fluid in zone as well, really smart processor, swarming ball skills, really savvy in run support too. So Kool-Aid McKinstry to me is still worth the pick. And if he's there, I think he's the top option. There are other guys like Nate Wiggins from Clemson who ran in the 4.2s at the NFL Combine. He's got really good recovery speed, a little bit lighter, a little less play strength and press for me, which kind of concerns me a little bit. But with his route recognition, I could see him being worth the pick too. So I think Kool-Aid, Nate Wiggins, maybe Cooper DeJean if you want to take a swing on him, but I project him more to the safety position at the next level. I think he can play either spot, but in press man, he's a little muscle bound, a little stiff in the hips sometimes on sharp redirections. So that's what concerns me there. So if you want a guy who can play CB and safety, I would look at DeJean, but if you want a pure corner, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Nate Wiggins, probably the top two guys. Offensive tackle, yeah.
I was just mentioning McKinstry because of the injury. It was so interesting. I think he's got a Jones fracture, but he worked out.
Yeah.
And then he's going to have surgery after. Boy, that concerns me. Have you heard people being concerned about that? Maybe that dropping him a little bit because the talent is there, but boy, that's a strange injury. The fact, I can go run a 4.3 or whatever he ran, and then I'm going to have surgery. That concerns me.
Yeah, it's a little interesting. If it were me, maybe I would have waited to be 100%. But also, we know how valuable the metrics can be, right? And to run a 4.47 with a Jones fracture, still recovering from that, it's impressive. But at the same time, you do wonder, foot injuries especially are injuries that can linger or get re-aggravated pretty easily. He's got a full offseason to recover from that. So for me, it's something I'm going to keep on the radar, but not something that's going to scare me off too much because he does have time to get to 100% from it. So, it's one thing to, again, just be cognizant of, but not going to let it kind of overrule me because I like him enough to take him at 22 from a talent perspective.
And then to Jody's point, the volume, that's where I was with the volume of tackles specifically in this draft. And my standpoint is, well, somebody's got to get pushed down the board because everybody's not taking a tackle. So I think there'll be tremendous value if the Eagles stay put, which they probably won't.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you've got Joe Olufashanu at the top, Troy Fatanu, Amarius Mims. You got Tyler Guyton. I think Guyton could be available there, and he's a right tackle. And also you have Lane Johnson to start for a year or two before he gets thrown in the fire. So I like that one. If they're willing to wait on it, Tyler Guyton to me has one of the highest dividend potentials in this class, 6'7", 325, I think over 34-inch arms, really explosive, really flexible, really good recovery athleticism. The hand usage, the precision is a little raw right now, but that's exactly what he needs, is time to sit and learn behind the scenes. And then even after that, you've got guys like J.C. Latham, Kingsley Suamataya, right? Jordan Morgan, if you want, he could slide inside the guard in the immediate timeline too. So there are a lot of options for you. The only tough part is too, there are developmental guys on day two if you want to wait, like Kieran Amagaji from Yale, Patrick Paul from Houston. You got guys like Roger Rosengarten from Washington. There's so much depth in the day two range as well. You could easily pick a corner at 22 like Kool-Aid and then maybe come away with Rosengarten in round 2 or round 3. And I think that's just as viable of an outcome.
Jody, you're muted.
I'm a little bit more of a Wiggins guy over Kool-Aid because, as John mentioned, that injury does scare me a little bit. Yeah. And I think Wiggins is overall athleticism. I understand he can put on 5 more pounds of muscle, but I think he's got a chance to be an all-pro corner. That's where I'm hoping they're going. We'll have to wait and see. Offensive line, you gave us the rundown on the tackles. Jason Kelsey retired this offseason, and everyone just expects they're going to move Nate Herbert to center, which we had fun with this week because the head coach admitted it to Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network. Oh, yeah, he's going to be our center. Then when he met with the rest of the media the day after, he goes, well, we're just going to have to wait and see. Come on, coach. Quit your because they're on. Anyway, there seems to be one guy, the kid from Oregon, Jackson Powers Johnson, who seems to have separated himself for all the other interior guys in the offensive line. Number one, is he getting down to 22? Number two, if he does and the Eagles decide to go there, is he worth that kind of pick? How good a player is he?
Yeah, and real quick before we talk centers, I want to ask you guys, Cam Jurgens, what's his status? Is he potentially going to move? Because I know he played center at Nebraska. And
he's going to be the starting center. Okay. Yeah. Now, Nick, that's what Jody was saying. Nick, at the annual meetings, the owners' meetings, Nick talked to Tom Pelissero on Monday and said, oh, yeah, Cam's going to be the center. And then Tuesday, he did his competitive advantage thing. Well, we got time. But, yeah, Cam Jurgens is going to be the center. Be very confident.
That's a good thing for you if you're looking at interior line in round 1, if you want to, because Jackson Powers Johnson played center Oregon, but he also translates really well to guard, I think. So if you want to put him at guard, you can play him there, put him at 22. I think there's a decent chance he'll be there at 22. There are some teams like the Seahawks at 16 could take him if they really like him. The Steelers, I think, still need a center, so they could take him at 20 if they really like him. But I think there's a decent chance that he falls because there's just so much talent at wide receiver, offensive tackle, other positions that could push him down the board. So it's possible if you get to day 2 and you still need one. Zach Frazier, I like a lot. He's probably confined to center, though, so doesn't have quite as much guard versatility. Tanner Bortolini, early day 3, is the guy that I would circle if you're looking for a center guard hybrid with that elite athleticism. He had like a 7.16 3-cone, which is 99.9 percentile. Really athletic, really explosive. His leverage management, his pad level can improve a little bit. His base load against power, but he's got some of the best athleticism in the class, I think, especially in heavy outside zone scheme. His mobility, his ability to drive in the run game is one of the best. So he'd be a very nice investment too.
A lot of people have argued that the Eagles are going to have to outscore people, and they already have all these playmakers, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. They add Saquon Barkley to the mix. Hey, why not go get another receiver? I've seen a couple high-profile draft analysts say maybe they'll take a receiver. 22, it's always about more than 1 year with Howie Roseman, too, so he knows probably can't pay A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith once Devontae gets an extension. So you want to get that younger receiver in under a cost-effective deal. If you're looking at 22 and saying receiver, give us a couple names.
If Brian Thomas Jr. is there, which I don't expect him to be, but on the off chance he is there, I think you run that card up 6'3", 209. The speed is incredible with him, 4.33, and it shows up on tape. Slot fade god. He can separate like anyone else. I think his flexibility is top tier. He's still refining his route tree and his nuance, but there's some really high-end flashes of blind spot awareness and leverage IQ, and then his ability to attack the football on the vertical plane is unmatched. So Brian Thomas Jr. for sure, Xavier Worthy, but if you're thinking they're going to re-sign Smith over Brown, I would probably lean away from Worthy just because he's a little lighter and it might be redundant with Devontae Smith, but his speed is incredible too. I mean, 4.21 40-yard dash, generational, and he knows how to use it as a route runner, so that's the fun part. Some other guys, Keon Coleman, might be a little rich for him. I think once you get past Brian Thomas Jr., you're getting to a territory where you might be better served to trade down to late first round or wait until round 2 for a guy. Xavier Legette in round 2 is one that I'd like a lot. 6'1", 220, really explosive athlete, really good size, speed specimen, and he's very good at snaring the ball past his frame too. But then he has some really bright flashes of route running ability, blind spot awareness as well. So I think if you're the Eagles, if you can't get Brian Thomas Jr., A.D. Mitchell is another one potentially, but there's some effort, down-to-down consistency concerns with him that you want to vet too. I think the best option is trade down in round 1 or wait until round 2. But Brian Thomas Jr. round 1, Xavier Legette round 2. Those are probably my top options for them.
They've got a couple of second-round picks, so my guess is that's where if they're going to go wide receiver, that's when they're going to go. Guy you and I have discussed before, I'm a big fan of. You're going to tell me where you think he's going to come off the board as per his talent. I like Jaylen McMillan better than Polk from Washington. And some people have Polk rated ahead of McMillan. I had McMillan ahead of Polk. Nobody has him ahead of Roma Dunze. He's the best wide receiver they had, and he's coming off the board in the first 6 or 7 picks. But where's McMillan going to be drafted? Where do you think on the board is it going to be in the range where the Eagles have a second-round pick?
I think it would be either that late second-round pick or somewhere in round 3. I think that's where he comes out the board. He's a top 75 talent for me personally. You mentioned we've talked about him numerous times, so checking all the boxes. But the vertical speed for sure, the route running nuance, the ability to cut stems at sharp angles and really manipulate DBs into optimal leverage angles. That's very strong with him. He wasn't 100% healthy in 2023. And when he was on the field, I think that affected his confidence at times. You saw a few more focus drops, but generally he has good hand technique too. So I think he's a guy who can play the boundary or the slot, just a really reliable separator with that vertical speed to stress defenses too. So I would take him in round 3, early round 3. Jalen Polk, I like a lot as well. I think Jalen Polk is really good in terms of, he's kind of a Puka light, that Puka profile, 6'1", 203, 32-inch arms.
Now I'm listening to Puka profile.
The universal, the two things that caused me to say that, because I know it's a lofty kind of comparison, but he's got universal alignment versatility. You can use him on motions. He's a good blocker in the slot, out wide, and then he has incredible hands, strong hands at the catch point, just hands of glue. Even when he has a defender inside his frame, he can corral it past his frame, gather it before it's the ground. Just really reliable converter, and he has enough explosiveness to create late snap separation too. So big fan of his, big fan of Jalen. I think at varying spots, you get either one of them, you're getting a weapon for your offense.
Now, as an Eagles reporter, Ian, I would have immediately shut you off when you said motion, because they don't use players in motion. Hopefully Kellen Moore changed that, so maybe that factors into the equation. At IC_draft, make sure you follow Ian, ProFootballNetwork.com. You can tell he knows his stuff when it comes to the NFL draft. One of the best in the business. I should have started here. I'm going to end here from my last question for you. True blue chip prospects, Jody and I were talking about it before you came on, never gets to 32. That's what I was talking about. There's never 32 of them. Where is your limit there this year? Where's that cutoff? Where's that the true first round picks, as I like to call it?
It's a good question. And I think it's higher than last year. I can definitively say that. I think if I had to guess, and I don't have my board off the top of my head right now, I would say 10 to 12. I would say around 10 to 12, maybe a dozen guys. Definitely May and Williams. I think Marvin Harrison Jr., Neighbors, Adunze, Brock Bowers, Joe Alt, Olu Fashanu, Terry and Arnold is one for me. Johnny Newton, Dallas Turner. So you're up into the 10, 11 range there. I think, it's almost a dozen. And that's a good thing, because those guys will probably go early, but they're going to push down some of the other really highly rated early first round guys. I think it's a good chance for the Eagles that one could be available at 22. We know the board plays out differently every year, but there is potential energy there for sure.
And here's where I am going to once again gruffly disagree with the usage of certain descriptive adjectives. Only 12 first-round draft picks. No, there are 32 first-round draft picks, okay?
I'm not being literal. Blue chip.
I'm being literal. If you want to call them blue chips, okay, there's only 12. Well, then you got to come up with a different color blue. Is it navy blue chips? Aqua blue chips? Because you got to fill out the 32, and it's just isn't me being a dick. There are rules in the NFL that separate the 32nd pick and the 33rd. That's why teams trade up to the bottom of the first round, because you get that 5th round of his contract. So if you're going to have a separation, not only on nights, you got to watch the first 32 picks, then you got to turn out for 20 hours. Then you got to come back for day 2. Forget about that. There are actual rules within the league that differentiate between 32 and 33. Yeah, so we got to come up with a blue color-coded system.
That's a different conversation. That's about contracts and strategy and things like that.
That's part of it. You're talking about taking picks, and then they have to be fit into the rules.
I'm just talking about the scouting world, and Ian can tell you that I didn't come up with this. I talk to scouts every year, and they're the ones who tell me. There's never.
I'm calling the scouts out. If you're just passing along information giving to you, John, that's fine. I'm calling out the scouts. You got to come up with a better way of describing it, much like legal tampering. There's no such thing. You got to do better than that, than just well, there's only 12 first-round
Well,
talent.
they don't
there
have
are
to
32
do better for
players that are going to
you.
be taken in the
They
first
don't have
round.
to do better for you.
Yeah, they
have
do.
their own
Yeah, they do. Hey, I'm talking right now. People can turn the hell off if they want, but you're not going to shut me up, and neither are any NFL scouts. Do better, scouts. Come up with a better way of labeling first-round picks.
The point is, there's a certain group of players each year, and then they're above everybody else, and then there's a drop off, and then there's another drop off, and then there's a drop. And Ian can tell you that's how you stack your board, and that's why there's first-round picks and second-round picks and third-round picks. But yeah, the difference in reality, 32 and 33 is a little bit different because, as you mentioned, from a contract standpoint, there's a difference with the fifth option year. But then if you go down, for instance, between the second round in 64 and 65, what is the difference? But one guy will forever be termed a second round pick and the other guy will be a third round pick. Is there really any difference between 64 and 65? No, not really.
Much
not in the
less
real world.
than the difference between 32 and 33.
Yeah, but that's contract related.
Yeah,
that's
that kind of counts. It's kind of
that's not evaluation.
You're dismissing it.
That's not evaluate. We're talking. Ian's an evaluator. We're talking about evaluation of players. Talent wise, what's the difference between 32 and 33, Ian?
Well, it depends on how the board falls, man. I mean, there's always first-round guys that fall. I will say, Jody, I'll work on that as a side project. I'll work on the terminology.
That's why you're as good as you are. You acknowledge.
No, 32 and 33. Yeah, I mean, other than you get the extra year, and that's why people over the years, a lot of teams have traded. Lamar Jackson was the 32nd pick. Teddy Bridgewater, I believe, was the 32nd pick. Because teams want that fifth-year option.
Correct.
And I've had this discussion with Howie. Sometimes you don't want a fifth-year option at a position. If you like a player, you don't want that. Running back was what he was talking about at the time, ironically, because he signed Saquon Barkley now. He said, you don't want a fifth-year option with a running back because you don't want that big spike. So, yeah, that's different.
Right.
That's not about evaluation.
Do they evaluate the talent on draft night differently because the guy is playing a position that you don't want a fifth-round draft pick? Well, then maybe you drop him out of the first round because you don't want to take him. That's why I say you need a better way to describe it than just, well, there were only 12 first-round talents in the draft. You got to do better than that. Well, there's more to it than that.
All right, I'll tell the scouts around.
Yes,
it's not up to Jody.
Please pass it along to all the scouts, and Ian's already acknowledged he's working on it. I think he'll probably have
blue chip is the blue chip is
okay, but then you got to have different colors of blue because there aren't 32 blue chippers.
Aquamarine, sky blue.
There you go.
I'll get the color palette out. We'll be good to go.
All right. When do you put out your next mock draft?
Next mock draft, I got one more, and it's, I think, after April 20th. I'll have to check the schedule, but it'll be in the lead up to the NFL draft. So it'll be right there on the doorstep. My final big board will be out the week of April 15th. That is my finalization date.
How deep do you go on the big board?
I'm going to go as far as I can for this one. I've been going to top 300 for the weeks leading up, but for this one, I'm going to go past 300, just kind of, get as many names out there as I can watch. So, we'll try and cover as much ground as we can.
And if you had to break down those into colors, you'd need like a color wheel.
You have to
do
for sure.
Some serious color research to be able to say where the drop is. Oh, we've dropped the color. Here we go. From 197 to 198, we now are in magenta. Should be something you should be thinking about. Ian, always great, buddy. Appreciate it whenever you come on board. We're going to have you back on before the draft. Thanks for doing it today.
Yes, sir. Jody, John, thank you for having me. Good to see you guys.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate it. Sorry we were arguing. Yeah, we always argue with the people.
ProFootballNetwork.com is where you find Ian's stuff, and on Twitter, IC_Cummings is I don't have his Twitter in front of me.
IC_draft.
Draft. That's what it is.
_draft. By the way, Bill Belichick was, I believe, 70. The 1 year is the lowest draft board I've ever heard. NFL teams don't go 300 deep. They typically go 150-ish, somewhere in that range, maybe even a little bit lower. They're really targeted. They only like certain guys, and Bill was down to 70 1 year, which is crazy.
It's just, well, it's crazy. Yes. Stupid would be the way I would describe it. Hey, if I'm the guy who's in charge, we got to have at least one player for every player that could be drafted. And it's 7 times 32, which is 320, whatever it is, 220. And then they add in the compensation picks. So about 240, 250. You got to have a draft board at 250, not 70, Bill. Do you just get lazy in your old age here, buddy?
Yeah, well, that's how deep they target them, because it's not about all 70 of those picks aren't the 70 best players. They're very savvy to the point they understand where their picks are going to be, and they only want certain guys at this pick and certain guys at this pick and certain guys at this pick. And yeah, I think it's the exact opposite. I think it's savvy. 70's a little bit light, but he didn't have a lot of picks that year. And that was part of it as well. But you're targeting each position in the draft. In other words, it's not that, you're not going to get certain guys at 22, the Eagles, is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So, they can talk about it and talk about Caleb Williams, but what's the point? And they don't want a quarterback anyway. I don't want to go down that route. But
so do you think the Eagles won't even have Caleb Williams on their board?
Not they'll have a not on their internal board of people they could potentially draft. No, he will not be on it for the obvious reason of he will not be available. So
agreed.
Why is he going to be on?
But then you can kid yourself by saying, we at 22, we got our 14th ranked player. Yeah, because you didn't have Caleb Williams on your board. You didn't have Drake May on your board. Yeah. You didn't get the 14th player. You got your 14th on your board because you eliminated some
everybody gets everybody they want. So the Eagles.
Is that miraculous or what, John?
It is.
Is that not the most miraculous thing? However,
yes.
Who was I talking to the other day? Are you a UB Brown fan?
I love UB. Love UB.
He's friggin' 80 years old, and he's still sharp as a tack. Great analyst. When he's doing a game, I specifically stick around because he's that good. It was one thing I hated about UB Brown. He did the draft for years for ESPN. They had the NBA draft. There was never a pick, including the 59th pick of the draft. There's 60. The next to last pick of the draft.
Yeah.
What a fit.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel, does this guy work for them? Yeah. I can see exactly where he's going to dominate from. He's the next to last pick of the draft. He can't be that good. Do you not go back and check your work afterwards? As John has pointed out, they ain't all working. The 4 quarterbacks that are going at the top of the draft, they're not all going to be franchise quarterbacks. It's just a given. Not with UB. Every year, every pick was the greatest pick the team could make.
Well, everybody, Ian's great, and you'll see that with a lot of draft guys. And everybody's great, and they're not.
Not with Kuiper. Kuiper's not afraid to tell you when he thinks a team's made a mistake.
No,
got him in trouble a couple times, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. But I mean, all you got to do is look at last year's draft. There are a lot of misses, and it's not a perfect science because you're dealing with human beings.
Exactly right.
It's like a job interview. When you go into any job interview, what do? You bullshit a little bit. Oh, I'm great. That blah blah blah. Yeah, everybody does it, right? Well, they're doing the same thing. You don't know. Oh, I don't like to work out in the off season. They're not saying that. I don't have a work ethic. They're trying to put on the best base. It ain't easy. And everybody points to the Jalen Ragers of the world, and that's why you pump up your chest when you find Jordan Mailata in the 7th round.
Yeah. That's the other side of the story where they emphasize the positive and just kind of move quickly past the negative. All right, we had some positive, we had some negative today. We got to figure it out and put a bow on the show next.